Today's video is sponsored by FaceCheck, an incredibly useful tool to help you with all things League of Legends. Check it out, before the game even starts, it shows you the top picks and bans for your role in your elo. It will also show you some stuff about your team. If your team has a smurf, you'll know it. It works directly with the League client, so once you're in Champion Select and you decide if you want to play Misfortune, for example, it will show you the build and runes, as well as a tab of recent pro builds. Then, with the click of a button, you can push the runes to your client and set them. You can check your stats and compare to other people in your rank to learn how you stack up, and you can also learn about a champion while waiting in queue. There's a post-game analysis that will let you know how you did in your recent match. If you won, you can learn how to repeat it, and if you lost, FaceCheck can help you figure out why. League is a game of resources and information, and FaceCheck will help you get as much information as possible. Check it out today using the link in the description down below, and good luck climbing. Nami is very, very strong. Quite possibly overpowered. There, that's the answer. I saved you some time. This is awkward. Like, I guess you can just click off the video now or something, but wait, hang on, please don't do that because there's a little more to the story here today. You see, in this game, we get to ban a champion, and when there's 150 plus, you better make sure to choose wisely. If there's ever one champion you never want to play against ever again, you don't have to. It's sort of funny, because there's this champion that Riot said that they recently released called Vex. It's so interesting. Apparently she looks like this, has this anti-mobility kit or something. She goes mid lane and builds AP. It's crazy, weird concept. It's just so strange how I've never seen her. For whatever reason, she's just not in my games. Okay, jokes aside, you would think that some people would always ban based on champion strength. And for the most part, they do, because a champion like Kai'Sa is a perfect example. At the moment, she has less than a 1% ban rate, indicating her current power level. Kai'Sa is like a B or C tier 80 carry at the moment. You can definitely snowball in the right circumstance, and if it's a huge support gap where you just keep getting kills, she can do well. That's not really the problem. The issue is in her consistency. At the moment, due to repeated nerfs, it's very difficult to always make sure that you can get out of laning phase and be strong late game as Kai'Sa. When this champion is strong, you can usually tell just by looking at her ban rate. She is no stranger to having the highest ban rate in the entire game. It's just that right now, she has one of the lowest. So you might take this information and then assume that all champions are like that. But that's not the case. Some champions, regardless of win rate and current power level, will either typically fill up the ban rate charts or never see that happen. One ADC that comes to mind instantly for me that barely ever gets banned, regardless of his current power level, except for in Pro and Challenger, is Varus. There's just nothing particularly frustrating about a poke champion with no mobility, no healing, and no stealth. Again, he can be super good. In fact, there are times where he has been the top priority pick in pro play. But in average tier solo queue, who bans Varus? Why not ban Yasuo or Zed or Aurelia or Yuumi? These champions are the epitome of get this out of my game. What these champions tend to have in their kit seems to frustrate a lot of players. It wouldn't matter at all if none of them had above a 50% win rate, they would still draw bans. Immobile mid lane mages never want to play against Yasuo or Zed. Top lane players don't want to play against Aurelia, and I don't think anyone really wants to deal with Yuumi. This is the reason for today's video topic, and why I think it's so interesting. For nearly her entire life as a League of Legends champion, Nami was just like Varus. There have been times during the Ardent meta, the Moonstaff meta earlier this season, Athene's Unholy Grail was a great item for her, where Nami has been a great champ. Generally speaking, she's been a solid support pick every single year for solo queue. She was never that annoying to play against. The bubble is a strong but fair ability to dodge, she has no dashes, her healing in late isn't anywhere near as broken as Soraka's, she doesn't have a silence, she doesn't do as much damage late game as Seraphine or Sona, and a while ago I even made a video about League of Legends best designed champions in which I stated that Nami was probably the best designed champ in the entire game. She's an all-around healthy and well-made champion, and despite a lot of popularity throughout the years and all of her strengths, would never see any bans. That narrative held true for about 7 years until now. Within the last 2 months, Nami's ban rate has grown every single patch to now reach an all-time high at close to 20%. Why? what in the world has changed? What's different about this version of Nami than before? And how come this is happening despite the fact that she doesn't even have the highest win rate in the support role? Right now, Nami has a higher ban rate than Pyke. Let that sink in for a second. During this preseason, where Pyke was given a new lethality item that lets him ult twice in a row, where there's a Pyke main in NA who has reached extremely high elo, this fish is banned more often. This is truly unprecedented, and to put it into perspective, let's go over a little bit of her history. We are getting very close to Nami's 9th birthday as she came out at the end of 2012. Long before the item rework and many changes to the support role, a standard Nami build would have looked something like this. Sightstone, Locket, Old Mikhail's Frost Queen's Claim was your go-to support item. This probably brings back a lot of memories for support mains. Then later on in Season 7, the obvious typical build would switch to include Redemption and Ardent Censer because, you know, OP. And things really wouldn't change for her and other enchanters until about 2018 and 2019, where an old school item would shift into the support role and out of the mid lane. Athene's. Athene's Unholy Grail for many years was the go-to mid lane item, where Syndra, Orianna, Lux, Gragas, and other old school mid lane mages back in the day would rush it first. It gave AP, MR, mana regen, CDR, and it had the presence of Mind Rune. You know the one where you get mana back on takedowns? Yeah, it essentially had that as a passive. If it were a mage versus mage matchup in the mid lane, there was no chance that both of them weren't rushing this first. And it got changed because it was sort of toxic for the game. It would stall out the mid lane meta since both champions had a ton of mana to clear the wave, both of them had MR as well, meaning you really couldn't kill each other solo. Eventually, Athene's would be reworked into an enchanter item that rewarded a bit of aggression, and Nami absolutely loved it. Her build options before this massive item rework in Season 11 were very nice. You could do Athene's into Ardent if you had an attack speed carry like Kog'Maw or Vayne, or you could do Redemption second if you liked the item. Or if you were good with the Mikhail's active, you could also do that. I can't stress enough just how good Athene's was for Nami. It rewarded a lot of player skill on this champ. The passive on this item granted you blood charges up to a cap based on damage dealt to enemies, and then you would consume the charges to heal your allies. A good Nami player could enter a fight by landing a bubble, ult using an E on her ally and auto-attacking the enemy down, and then using her W on an ally for a massive heal. You were rewarded for playing well and landing your abilities rather than just standing back. This is why a good portion of the posts on the Nami mains Reddit have been begging for an item like Athene's to return. Not to say that there aren't obvious biases involved here, but for all enchanters in the game, Nami would use Athene's the best. However, heading into the new season, Athene's was gone in favor of a whole new suite of support items: Moonstone, Imperial Mandate, a reworked Shurelya's, Staff of Flowing Water, and more. At the very beginning of the year, one of the first metas that we saw, of course after Amumu stopped microwaving Baron at 20 minutes because that was hotfixed, was the Moonstaff meta. Moonstone Renewer and Staff of Flowing Water were a deadly combination for enchanters, both of which would see nerfs. The problem is that Nami couldn't abuse these two items as well as, let's say, Ivern, Janna, Seraphine, or Karma could, and it meant that she wasn't in the best spot a few months back. She was decent, like she's always been, but not top tier. The other enchanters this year always overshadowed her with their power. We would see the Sona update, where she was absolutely disgusting for a couple of patches, and she technically still has the highest win rate in the support role. Also, for about 1 month, Soraka needed to be permabanned until she was nerfed, because Riot decided it would be a good idea to buff her to cleanse grievous wounds on her ultimate. Yeah, I don't know. Lulu also racked up a crap ton of bans this year, which led to nerfs on 11-16, finally toning her down a bit, and of course after multiple Yumi buffs right before Worlds, turns out, hey, it's broken, and she was a must ban in pro play, which to no surprise, meant that we saw some Yumi nerfs. Nearly every other enchanter, minus Janna this year, has received some level of nerfs. So after Nami was buffed on 11-17, and her core item Imperial Mandate was buffed on 11-20, we now begin to see why Nami is favorable. But that still doesn't tell the whole story. In order to understand why this is different and she's finally drawing bans using a keystone rune she's never used before, we need to understand what happened to her on patch 10.1. The first patch of season 10 to kick off 2020. On that day, Nami received a buff that flew way under most players' radar. Nami's E Tide Caller's Blessing has always been an underrated ability. For years it's been a great way to help set up kills and win trades. You could pop an E on the Draven, make his autos do extra damage and slow. Lucian could dash in and with his passive, pop 2 of the bubbles instantly. But it also only applied on auto attacks, making it very good for Kog'Maw, Lucian, and Draven, but not as good for some other champs. Ever since patch 10.1, Nami's E can now be applied by spells. This had so many implications right away and set her up to be a great duo partner for mage APCs down bot. But people didn't abuse it right away. For example, Karthus bot lane is now a great pairing with Nami since his Qs would hit harder in slow, but it's taken people a while to figure that out. But the point of this buff wasn't just to make Nami good with mages, because actually a lot of ADCs do have some good spell damage. Caitlyn could auto twice and then Q for example and pop all of the Nami bubbles. Draven's E is a spell that does damage on top of its CC. Kog'Maw could Q to slow an enemy and then auto them twice and slow again with his E or something like that. The possibilities in this buff were substantial, but what makes it so good is something that would not become meta right away. It would be close to a year and a half later till I saw my first Electrocute Nami. Obviously, Electrocute is a rune that we typically see in mages or assassins. The only support pick that does commonly take Electrocute is Zyra, but that's because she's essentially just a full mage. The reason she has to play support is because laning mid is too dangerous for her. Also, Zyra typically takes Dark Harvest or Comet anyway, and really unless you're talking about Bard, it's rare that we see a support taking Electrocute. But on Nami, it's really disgusting. Since the buff to make her E pop on ally spells, it means that Nami can proc Electrocute instantly with a Lucian and never even see the enemy. All that Nami Lucian have to do is press E on Lucian and he can Q auto with his passive, and Nami from a full screen away could be bursting you. She doesn't have to land Q, W, auto attack, or alt to proc this keystone. Each one of the Nami E bubbles will count. I believe this right here is the core reason for Nami's high ban rate. The amount of effectiveness from a combo like Lucian Nami or Misfortune is so dang high and very easy to execute. It just sort of dumbs down what it takes to be good at Nami. Your kit can be so good even if you're just an E bot. Nami players have had years of practice trying to get good at landing bubbles, being perfect with your ebb and flow, hitting huge ults, but that right there isn't as necessary anymore because your E with this build is so disgusting. It's not just that Electrocute can single-handedly pop on your E, it's also that Mandate is now extremely strong. Nami has the best synergy with it in the entire game. Again, because her E slows, the Mandate damage starts on just one ability from a full screen away. Your ADC can play hyper aggressive, and you as Nami can buff their damage by a ton. Just stay back and press EW on them. The Nami players who are actually good at the champion make her nearly unbeatable during the mid game. If you can hit your bubbles, watch out. It's definitely going to be a sub gap. Trust me, next time you have a Nami on your team who builds Mandate, check the damage on that item by pressing tab and highlighting over the item. It is not uncommon to see your support with their support item to either have the highest or second highest damage mythic in the game. There's a very good chance that Nami's Mandate has done around 2500 damage and Syndra's Ludens has done only 1900. I've seen it happen many times. The issue here that is causing Nami's ban rate is not just a matter of champion power, it's the way in which she is powerful. Nami has never been this risk-free for being so effective. If all you ever do is sit really far back and use your Q defensively now, you can make Nami work. When Nami was taking Summon Aerie or Guardian, maxing W into Q and walking forward to try to land clutch bubbles, it made the champion seem substantially more fair and punishable. Now, in some games, Lucian Nami can 2v8 the entire game because their damage wrapped together is totally unfair. Does this mean that Nami needs to be nerfed? Because again, her win rate in the support role isn't anything higher than we expect for her. She's not the hardest champion in the game, and support in general is pretty strong right now. So 51.5%? That's kind of reasonable, right? I mean, she's even had higher win rates than that before. So what gives? One explanation could be that we are seeing more people try out Nami and first timing her with this powerful build, dragging her win rate down a little bit. Another reason could be that she's only top tier if paired with a strong combo like Lucian, Draven, or Misfortune, and that's what we saw in Worlds actually. Nami would draw a lot of bans towards the end, but that's because teams wanted to deny those combos specifically. They weren't just scared of Nami. I think what would make sense is to tone down Mandate just a bit, or even remove the fact that her E can proc Electrocute just by itself, and then go from there. Some high elo Nami players don't even take Electrocute every game, or at all. Some situations Guardian can make a lot of sense, and Nami isn't weak by taking Summon Airy by any means because Mandate is just still so good. The interaction with Electrocute is probably just unhealthy and doesn't really feel that fair to play against, and I think that's the most important thing when it comes to ban rate. People don't feel like Yuumi is fair to play against, and I would agree, but the facts are facts, her win rate is terrible. Taric support has a much higher win rate, but no one plays or bans Taric. Win rates, ban rates, they don't always make sense. These numbers don't always tell you the full story. Sometimes players just don't like certain things, even if logically there isn't a reason to hate it, and it might even have counterplay. I've had a great time today studying this little story about Nami, and it really goes to show just how much League of Legends can change. Within a few weeks, Nami went from being never banned to hard to get in Champion Select. Historically, people would ban Nami as a joke sometimes, since everyone kind of agreed that she's fair, but apparently, that's changed. People really wouldn't waste their ban on Nami with all these 200 years champions if they didn't like playing against it. That's a fact. When you could ban Kayn, Echo, Fizz, Draven, Zed, Aurelia, Yuumi, who knows what you would want to ban, but you ban Nami? Wow, it must be pretty darn annoying to play against then. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, please be sure to leave it a like. It's, just the best that you could possibly do to help me if you enjoyed the video and you made it all the way to the end. I would seriously appreciate it, and every little bit that you could do really helps. Thank you guys so much. I hope that you have a wonderful holiday season, and I'll see you next time.